evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the exact type of party Jack Tragis would have loved. He would have been talking and holding his beer and chit-chatting. So it's just so appropriate. And thank you all for making time to be here and help capture some of the stories and share some of the pictures. My name is Tammy. I'm Jack's daughter, and being his daughter has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. And there's so many things I want to remember about my dad. He was a mentor, a protector, a storyteller, and let's be honest, a bit of a character. He was a man who laid down the law in the early years. No dating unless Dad took the potential suitor out into the garage and had his special conversation by the gun rack. Then we had dinner promptly at 5 o'clock while he was in the military. You must be at the dinner table. No dragging my feet in the sandals, either literally or figuratively, and doing chores at the age of 9. For all these rules and regulations, Dad had a softer side, especially when it came to spending time together. I'm 9 years apart from John, so in the beginning, Dad and I camped in Colorado. We drank from the mountain streams. He brought his little nature book, and we identified the trees. He had a love of horses, which was passed down to me. He rode Western, I rode English. We hung out a lot until I kept asking to bring a blow dryer and makeup on the camping trips, and that was the end of that. And because he was a rescue pilot, I thought that meant Dad could do anything. So while attending elementary school in Colorado Springs, I decided that for my show and tell, I thought it would be completely reasonable for my dad, a real-life Vietnam War hero, to land an Army helicopter on the playground, and all the kids could come by and meet him, and I'd be the princess for the day. Well, believe it or not, he did. Those were very different times. Captain Tragis touched down right there on the school grounds, and then afterwards, all the classes had to write thank you notes. And just recently, I found the letter tucked inside one of Dad's keepsake notes from way back then, and it reminds me how proud I am to be his daughter. Dad believed in discipline, but also love. He refused to co-sign on my dream car. I was my nephew's age, I was in my teens, and I wanted this gold Trans Am, and I just thought he was so mean because he wouldn't co-sign on the car. But he was teaching me independence. He also taught me to take pride in my work, to walk with purpose, and to show respect. And during our car rides, he used that time to show me life's lessons, whether I wanted to hear them or not. Turns out many of those life lessons have stayed with me. Love, he said, is doing things you don't always want to do. And he told this to me when we had a big family gathering and they were watching a movie, and I didn't want to watch a movie. He says, that's not what love looks like. Another lesson, never embarrass your spouse in public, and he lived what he taught. While my dad attended Notre Dame for his MBA, I attended a nearby Catholic school, and after school I'd walk through campus and hang out with his classmates where they programmed computer on these paper cards at the time. And the classmates would come over because a lot of them didn't have some place to go for the holidays, and there were some infamous card games that happened at the Tragis household. My mom at the time managed the Notre Dame bookstore when number 3, Joe Montana, was the quarterback. Those were some good times. When I moved to Fairbanks 30 years ago, I was known as Jack's daughter. He worked at Bassett Army Hospital, Credit Union One, and Utility Services of Alaska. He helped start the Arctic Lions and the Fairbanks Ice Dogs. Eventually, as his career wound down and mine ramped up, he took great pride in being known as Tammy's dad. It had come full circle. Dad's faith shaped everything. When I was a child, he had a clever way of ensuring I paid attention in church, because he would randomly ask me, what was the priest's homily about today, Tammy? Later in life, Dad served as a Stephen minister, offering compassion and prayer to those going through difficult times. Well, my dad was a romantic. He adored my mother. He taught me to look for someone who would be more than a husband, but a partner and a friend. And when I met Al, a hunter, a marksman, and a reliable retriever of Dad's truck from the airport, Dad welcomed him like a son. Dad was so many things: a decorated Army veteran, a helicopter rescue pilot, a leader in the hockey community, a fisherman with a world record halibut, a man of deep Catholic faith, a grandfather, a proud father, and a dedicated husband. In his final chapter, dementia came like an unwelcome visitor. Dad didn't want it, and we didn't want it for him. But my brother John, our spouses, and I took the opportunity to care for him. It was hard. It was humbling, but it was an honor. In the process, my brother John and I became closer. Although we both live in Fairbanks, we often have busy lives that keep us apart. So caring for our dad gave us the gift of leaning in on each other. John was my rock when I stumbled, and I was his. Tonight is about remembering Jack Tragis, seeing the photos, sharing the stories, and celebrating a life well lived. Please, if you haven't already, add your name to the board. It just seems a little odd than somebody going, no, I'm next, I'm not next, I don't want to say anything. But we want to hear your stories, and we're recording this to have a wonderful keepsake, and we want to remember the Jack that you knew. To our family who traveled to be here, thank you. Aunt Diane, you and Uncle Dave were a steady presence in Dad's care in Colorado, and we are deeply grateful. And Greg Thomas, thank you for being part of our extended family for over 4 decades, from the Notre Dame years until now. I've shared my memories, and now it's time for you to hear from someone who carries just as many stories as I do, and just as much love for our dad. Please welcome my brother, John.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to beat, number one. Number two, she's the oldest, so she went first. Therefore, some of these themes may be repeats, so if they are, bear with me, please. Is it looping? Interesting. Okay. All right, so thank you all for coming and being here. It means a lot to us, means a lot to the family, and we appreciate your time today. My son Ian is helping me understand how to use this microphone. So, John Clay Tragis is my father, and my name is John Clay Tragis too. My grandfather was named John as well, and to save us from guessing who was being called to task, my dad went by Jack. I'm going to start by sharing a story with you about my dad, what he did for his father at this very type of event back in Gresham, Oregon in 1999. Tori and I had settled in Colorado Springs, and we were starting our own life and transitioning to our new careers. I got the call that my grandpa Tragis had passed away on Easter Sunday after eating his last ham dinner. He fell asleep in his chair, and I always thought to myself, like, that is the way to go, right? I mean, literally fell asleep and unfortunately didn't wake up. At the church, watching people file into the ceremony, I noticed that most of them were there to support my Grandma Betty more than they were to honor my grandfather's passing. She was sweetness and light to that church, and my grandpa, who was gruff and a no-nonsense personality, was the baggage that came along with her. Soon everyone settled down and we got started. The mood in the room, honestly, was feeling complacent and obligatory from the pastor all the way down to the band. That was until my dad stepped up to the podium. From the moment on, it was as if lightning had struck the room. It was one of the most awe-inspiring send-offs you could ever witness. With authority and full-throated conviction, he honored his father and set the record straight about who they were dealing with and the influence he had had on the man standing before him that day. I was honored to be in the room and to have my dad, who was doing right by his own father at the time. That kind of influence is why I'm here speaking with you today. I'm sure many of you think leader when you think of Jack Tragis, leader of the military, the Catholic Church, in hockey, and in life in general. That is certainly true. He is not one to normally sit back and let others lead, unless my mom had taken over. And that characteristic helped define who he was. He often told me I would lead as well someday. It was in our blood, and I better get used to it. But I want to talk to you about courage, and which I think defined my dad as much, if not more, than leadership. I was amazed to learn recently that my dad's grandfather and his two brothers were fresh off the boat Lithuanians who had crisscrossed the country working in coal mines almost their entire lives. Amazing when you think about it. From immigrant coal miners to college-educated senior military officer and CFO in 2 generations. True to his heritage, he never stopped exploring. He had the courage and tenacity to venture into areas no Tragis had been before. He and my mother kept going, crisscrossing the country like his forefathers before him in pursuit of a new life together from the safety and comfort of hometowns and familiar friends. Jack Tragis went from riding along in his grandfather's milk route via horse and cart to Detroit Catholic Central, U.S. Army enlisted service with a tour in Korea, ROTC graduate at the University of Detroit, graduate from military flight school, 2 tours in Vietnam and then search and rescue in Colorado, MBA at the University of Notre Dame, comptroller at Bassett Army Hospital Fairbanks, and then a successful transition to civilian life as a CPA in operations and administration for the credit union and college utilities. And then a final act in hockey, serving as president to Faha, Arctic Lions, and the Fairbanks Ice Dogs. In the end, he was trying to run the Fitzsimmons Retirement Center by organizing events for the guys he was living with. When I hear that and think about my own experiences in life, I think about the courage it must have taken to beat back the instincts to become complacent, to ease off the gas and to coast a bit. There was no coasting on his watch. He led by example to never get too comfortable in a pursuit of careers, passions, and interests. To that end, a funny story about moving to Alaska. I was 10 years old and it was a trip of a lifetime. The enormity of the drive, the sense of adventure, and life that awaited us in this far-off destination was all very exciting. In reality, there was a lot of stops along the way, and it was early in the journey. We had a new tent, this giant Hillary that he had purchased for the trip. I think he picked it because it was the only one that all 6'7" of him could fit into it comfortably. Early on in the Midwest, we had stopped for the night to make camp. By that time, it was late and getting dark. Then it started raining. We were all very tired and hungry, and we wanted to get inside the tent and out of the rain. That's about the time I looked at the site next to us and saw a couple in their heated camper sitting at their little table, eating dinner and waving at us. I made the old untimely decision to ask why we didn't have a heated camper and instead we had this cold, wet tent to sleep in. He stopped, looked at me with that locked jaw, careful what you say next look, and proceeded to inform me of the benefits of real camping in the woods and tents and not being too comfortable in life. In essence, buck up, life's not easy, get used to it, and we have it pretty good on this side of the grass if we focus on what we're doing. I hold that experience as a valuable lesson to this day. He taught me the value of working for what you have, to enjoy the raw elements, to know how to survive and even thrive in austere environments, and to push beyond your comfort zone. We had a great trip, and as you know, we never left. I think he knew that was the plan, and I suspect my mom really did too. Okay, the last cast story, the one we all know. My angle on it is the one you don't know. I never served in the military. It was never expected of me. I can honestly say my dad gave me the foundation to achieve my goals and follow my own path. He never steered me in a direction of his own choosing, so I chose wildland fire. I was 23 and jumped right in. It was 1996, and for 23 days, we worked on the fire line outside of Delta. No phones or any real connection to the outside world. When we demobilized, we took a civilian helicopter ride back to Fort Greely. Our crew settled into the main hangar with the main hangar doors open facing the airfield. It was all new and exciting to me, and I was looking forward to making the call home to share my experience. So I dialed 452-7246, and my mom answered the phone. Now, since this was a military hangar, there were 4 UH-1 Huey helicopters lined up perfectly down the hangar deck. I had just taken a ride in the civilian version of the Huey, so seeing helicopters was not that exciting to me at this point. What was interesting, though, was that these Hueys were all decked out in Dustoff paint schemes, just like the one my dad flew in Vietnam. I barely uttered hello when Mom excitedly told me the big news about the big fish. That's when the hair on the back of my neck stood up. The coincidence of seeing those pristine helicopters all lined up with their red and white crosses on them while I received the news was surreal. Two of the main events of my dad's life had come together at the very moment his own son heard the news about what he had achieved with that last cast. The moment crystallized my view that my dad, in his own special way, was larger in life in his history and achievements. The record still stands to this day. He was humble to the end about the experience, being sure to recognize the captain, the crew, and his fishing buddies all doing their part to help him set the record straight, or set the record. I once heard someone ask him what he enjoyed most, fishing or hunting. Hunting, he said with little hesitation. He enjoyed the raw nature of big game hunting, the challenge and exhilaration of the hunt. In his prime, few could keep up as they roamed the Alaska range hunting sheep, caribou, and moose. He felt most alive out there, and without a doubt, his heart truly belonged to spending time with his hunting companions and eventually his grandson for his first moose hunt. What he truly enjoyed more than anything was the solitude and peace those epic hunts brought him. Time waits for no man, and when our dad passed away, I began to ask myself what stories I would tell. Would I rise to the occasion that he met when his father passed away and he delivered his remarks so profoundly that spring day in Oregon? In the end, I was able to call upon the depth of character and tenacity instilled in me by the very man we are honoring today to rise up and meet the challenge, to not shy away from one's duty to friends and family, to honor the man we know and who I'll always remember as my father, John Clay Tragis. Okay, this is the unscripted part my wife didn't get to edit, so this is a lightning round. You see a photo up there. My dad was in a motorcycle club in Detroit. He once told me he could never ride a motorcycle again for fear he couldn't control himself with all that speed. He knew his limits. We once found his leather riding pants in my mom's cedar chest, and I can tell you a lot of cows died to make those pants. He also said the official passenger carrying capacity of a Huey was just a suggestion, and also thought a Super Cub could carry about as much as his Huey could. Ask Andy Greenblatt with Shadow Aviation how those conversations went. My dad took his last sip of whiskey the night before he got a stressed out call from my mom that I was in the hospital with a concussion after wrecking my bike. He told my uncle that it was the longest, most miserable drive home he'd ever had to suffer through. He'd have small sips of brandy with his hunting buddy Nate Miller to honor the moment of their hunt. Their hunts meant that much to him. My dad loved Notre Dame and the academic challenges and rewards he accepted and earned there. His friendship to Greg Thomas and others live on through to this day. He and my mom were living the dream and were at the school for the 1977 championship football season when Joe Montana was QB. My dad was on the internet in the 1980s. He was talking to his Army buddies on DARPANet, which was probably why I got into the field myself. And he loved my mom and unfortunately wasn't the same after she passed. He was searching for companionship and safe harbor for what he sensed was on the horizon. I want to thank my boys for getting him out to the shooting range as much as they did for giving him the greatest thing we all can, time to be with one another. And I want to thank my sister for being a partner in this journey. Okay, I'm almost done, I promise. Okay, I have some Jackisms that I picked up as a kid. Thank you, Jim. I stole some of your ideas, but not yours directly. All right, Lord willing and the creeks don't rise. Jesus jumping Jehoshaphat, which was a companion to my mom's Jesus marrying Joseph. Pick your battles, safety first, do unto others as they do unto you, and body, mind, and spirit. And he always made sure to say body, mind, and spirit because it takes all three to live a full life. And hallelujah when things went our way. So hallelujah to Jack Tragis. Thank you.
If you don't know who I am, I'm Diane Lukenhouse. My sister Darlene was married to Jack. So, y'all, I've been talking to some of you about how long you've known Jack, and I've been able to slip in. I've known him longer than any of you. I've known him for 63 years. That makes me 11 when he met my sister and started courting her. So this is my life with Jack Tragis. At the ripe old age of 11, this man came into our family via my sister Darlene. He was so tall and not easy to understand. So after that guy came in to be part of our family, he studied all the time. He was going to the University of Detroit. So we weren't smart people. We married smart, so that got us great smart kids. So yeah, so it seemed like Jack was always studying. Well, years go by, and he was probably the greatest gift that our family had gotten up to that point, being married to Darlene. So he brought so many gifts, and Tammy and John are big parts of those gifts. My dad taught Jack so much, even though he didn't always want to learn them. He picked up a lot of good things from my dad, even some new swear words, along with some good woodworking tips, and Jack ended up being quite a handyman. Now, for the part in my life today, I would not be who I am, where I am, have what I have, and be able to give what I give. With a big surprise to most of you, my husband, Dave Lukenhouse, worked for Jack Tragis. So in other words, my husband married his boss's sister-in-law. Smart man, yeah, very smart man. And so when I say I am who I am, I owe so much of that to Dave, but I also owe so much of that to Jack for his friendship with my husband. So I want to, many times I have said that the greatest gift my mother ever gave me was her faith, and the greatest gift my dad ever left me was his sense of humor. And now I can say that the greatest gift Dar and Jack ever gave me was Dave. Thank you. I am so blessed because of all of you, and I thank God. At this time, I would like to give Jack the highest medal that you can receive. This was brought and passed by the President for the Vietnam Dustoff Association. This is the Congressional Gold Medal recipient for Jack Tragis for the medevac pilots that flew in Vietnam. I wish Jack was here, but I know in his heart he earned this. Like Dave said, he rescued 1,800 people during Vietnam, and they're miracles. My husband Dave and I received a miracle last summer, and I want this to happen more. I mean, the only reason I'm going to share it is because it should be shared, and it was put on Channel 2 Detroit News, that there was a man who my husband had saved in Vietnam and for years wanted to meet the helicopter pilot that flew in and saved him. And he had another friend do research, and they went to the archives and found out the day that this man was saved, who the pilot was. And at that time, Dave had the call sign of Dustoff Niner Niner. Jack's was Dustoff. Okay. And so this man tracked down my husband, and we were blessed just north of Detroit last summer to have a reunion with him and his 3 girls. One flew in from Canada, one flew in from New Mexico, and the other one still lived there, and they all just wanted to meet the man that saved him. And I would love nothing more than for this experience to spread and for people that Jack saved to come forward, and we'll work on all of that. So thank you. God bless you all, and it's just been a gift and a blessing for me to be part of Darn Jack's life. Whether she needed surgery, I was always there. When she was having a baby, I was always there. Whenever she needed me, I'd be there. And so I know she's in my heart. I know Jack is in my heart and will never leave. And my gratitude is just more than I can even say. So thank you all, and God bless you.
Kind of a funny story. First day I met Jack was in MBA school, and we had to sit. It was a 3-tiered, U-shaped room. Professor down the front. It was tiered, and me being a Thomas, Tragis was next to me. We had name cards, and we had to introduce ourselves, to the class and so forth. And I went through my thing, background and everything like that, and I handed a microphone to Jack. Well, Jack didn't need a microphone. The whole place shook when he spoke. And, he said, Captain in the Army. I stood at attention, when he was there. But it was just remarkable times. I do remember having a conversation with Darlene, though, that when she told me that Jack was going up to Alaska, and she says, I'm not going. I'm not going. I said, well, you can't. You got to go. I'm not going. And then, but Jack was telling me about the story with John, how they drove up here, drove from San Antonio on up, and that it was something that he would always remember. But Jack was 6'7", and he was a former basketball player, but he was a little bit slow at 39 to play with the young kids on campus. So he played with the faculty, but he was so tall that they stopped inviting him, to play anymore. And so he made do. He played racquetball and things like that. But he was an important part of my life. as is all of the Tragises. And I know he's here today. I do. Looking down. And he loved Notre Dame so much that he would go back for games and so forth, and kind of relish in the moment. But the one thing I learned at Notre Dame was don't sit behind Jack in the stands because I couldn't see anything. So the rule was he had to sit behind me, and but he commentated on everything. Yeah, we didn't need commentators because Jack was, he knew everything that was going on. But he was well known around campus because of his height. Notre Dame has a bookstore tournament every year with several hundred teams, and Jack played in it. And unfortunately, he was a little bit slower than some of the younger kids. But he did make it up and down the court a couple of times, I have to say that. But he was a big part there. And Darlene was known around campus because she was in the bookstore. And she'd ask all the, she just was known. Everybody knew her. And, but they were the perfect couple. And they accepted me into their family off campus. And for that, I'm always grateful. But Jack, we'll see you again someday. Okay? Not too soon, but. Okay.
Hi, I'm Nate Miller. Jack and I were hunting partners, fishing partners, four-wheeling partners, anything outdoors, we went and found a way to do it. I first met Jack in June of 1986. I had just arrived at Wainwright about a week before and just moved into my quarters. It was an apartment in a building of 7 apartments. And Jack was one of my neighbors. I saw him out with a boat, washing the boat, so I went out and introduced myself, and we started talking about fishing since he was cleaning the boat. Made sense. And then we got on to, well, do you hunt? Yes, I hunt, sure. You want to hunt in Alaska? I hope to. Good, we'll work on that. He said, do you like to shoot? Well, yeah, all the time, as much as I can. We made a date for being at the range, at the Cushman Range that following weekend, and met Jack and one of his former hunting partners, Glenn Taplin, who had hunted with him for several years, and went to the range, 2 or 3 hours on the range. We're talking about different weapons, different calibers, what bullet do you use. We all were reloading our own ammunition, and had some very good conversations. We left the range, went to breakfast, and continued talking. And we set the range schedule up where we did this almost every weekend, unless it interfered with the fishing trip. We tried to do most of our shooting in the April to about October time frames, because when it starts getting cold, the springs in the firearms don't respond very well. They sometimes get weak. And a broken spring is the wrong thing to have. But we had many opportunities to go out and enjoy the outdoors. One of the first things we learned was the two of us don't fit in a 2-man tent. we decided that, okay, we've done it once, we'll probably end up trying it again sometimes, but let's for now plan, if we're gonna be two of us, we're gonna have at least a four-man tent. I had one, no problem. If it's gonna be three of us, it's gonna be a six-man tent or a wall tent. And we pretty much held with that throughout the hunting experiences. We did take a two-man tent on one sheep hunt that we went on, that same disaster, same problem, we don't fit, but we endured the thing to have a good hunt. And we had many hunts where we didn't fire a single round, but still had a great experience, had great enjoyment of the outdoors. And if you've never been up in the high country in the 7,000-foot range of elevation on a nice clear night in August while you're sheep hunting, and the northern lights come out, even us deaf guys could hear them. It was amazing. It's just a wonderful experience that very few people will ever go through. But on almost every trip, there was some kind of an event happen that would draw attention to a notable thing for Jack. You notice in one of the pictures, he's there with at a fire cooking what looks to be a meal on a square head. He's cooking potatoes and onions. We've had a moose camp where we don't have a hard meal of fresh food until we take a moose. Well, we'd taken a moose. The next morning we had pancakes. That evening we're having tenderloin and potatoes and onions. Well, if you don't watch Jack while he's cooking, there won't be any potatoes and onions for anybody else. He'll eat them all. So you got to keep your eye on him. And anybody new to the camp, we tell the same thing. You got to watch Jack. Don't let him eat them all. Sometimes we take 10 pounds of potatoes with us just to make sure that there'll be some other than Jack. And sometimes we would have potatoes and onions 2 or 3 times, depending on how successful the hunts had been. But sheep hunting up in those mountains, he'd gone on a sheep hunt in '86, and after he got back, he related to me almost day by day how the hunt had gone and a couple of experiences he had on it, one with a bear charge. And he and Glenn were ready to shoot. And I mean, at the last instant, the bear changed his mind and went away. But Jack, I think, was a bear magnet, because I went with him on the sheep hunt the next year, and the 13th bear I saw on that hunt was at 50 feet. And that's just, fortunately, hollering and yelling, and he turned and went the other way also. But as you saw later, Jack took a grizzly bear on a hunt. I took the picture. I remember the event well. I've since taken a bear out there. We've hunted this same valley since 1989, and for moose and caribou. And it's been a wonderful area. The population is down. The fishing game has been very successful in reducing the moose population to the point where few bulls are being seen now, but that'll change in time. I hope I'm around to see it. But some of the events that we would do, just climbing the hill to get the whole picture of the area, we could get up to about 1,000 foot above the ground level. We would get up close to 5,000 feet. And you'd be able to see for miles. And you say, well, you got trees, but there were a lot of open areas, and you see the moose walk along the tree lines or through the middle of an area, and we'd take off on a stalk, trying to cut the moose off and get a shot. The first few years we were there, it was any bull, so it was easy. Then the rules changed. It had to be a 3 brow tine or 50 inches. So you had to get your measuring stick out and figure out exactly how big this moose really is, and do you want to take the chance that he's only 49 inches? And we had the misfortune to have a hunter joining us one year that took a moose that he shouldn't have, and of course had to notify Fish and Game, and they take the meat as well, anything. And that's one of the hazards that you've got to teach young hunters, that you got to be sure of what you're doing and listen to who's your mentor, because they're going to tell you whether you should shoot or not. And that was one of the things, that was a learning experience. We had so many things that we did on fishing trips. Some of the trips on the Clutina where you're standing in the water about knee deep fishing for kings, and you can feel the red salmons bumping your legs as they're going upstream. And am I fishing for the wrong thing here? But both of them. We had the chance to catch the kings, we catch reds. Always have fresh fish while we were in camp there. But some of the experiences on a coastal bear hunt, brown bear hunt, were on a Fog Neck Island, and we had gone out on a old logging road from years past, and we sat and watched snow melt for a couple of days. And then we're out one day and we're coming back, it's been snowing, there's fresh snow falling, and Jack's looking up at a tree and he's reaching and he can't touch the mark on the tree. It's about 1.5 feet over his head. And it's fresh scratches where a bear has raked his claws across the tree. And about that time, I'm looking down, I'm standing in a bear print, and I got size 16 feet. And the footprint of the bear enclosed my foot very easily. We looked for that bear day and night, and we never saw hide a hair of him. See his prints every now and then, know where he had been. But that was one of those hunts where we kept hoping to see that bear, because he probably was a 10-foot or better bear. But a fun experience. Another bear hunt for coastal bear on a Fog Neck Island, and we're sitting there, we're looking again, spring hunt, we're watching snow melt. We see a bear come out of a den, what appeared to be a den. We're looking, and it's across the island to us, and we'd just gotten there, and all our equipment came but our gasoline. And we had a Zodiac with a motor, we were ready to go across, no gas, so we just watched the bear and had a Walt Disney experience. And we had several of those on other occasions. But just about every hunt, every fishing trip, things that we would do, talking to one another, conversations on any subject. Politics were always a hot subject. Talking about kids and grandkids as time went on. All good experiences. A great man, great mentor for me. And Jack, thank you for the memories.
Jack was very proud of Darlene while he studied and got his MBA at Notre Dame. She helped to run the bookstore there, and every weekend there was a football game, no matter how much she tried to stock the shelves with sweatshirts and t-shirts and items for the Notre Dame football team. The store sold out and the shelves were bare. With that, when Darlene passed, he asked if the Notre Dame fight song could be part of her funeral mass. I said, Jack, we need to use liturgical music. But I did a little bit of research, and the Notre Dame fight song was originally written by a man named Michael Shea, who later went on to become a priest. And the lyrics were originally helping to speak about Christ's victory over sin and death. And so, while we did not play the song, I at least used the lyrics of Marching to Victory to explain how Darlene marched to victory with the Notre Dame fight song. And now we await Jack to do the same.
Okay, so from my table back there is about 20 steps to here. So I got my steps in for today. And then the 20 I take back there are steps for tomorrow, so good job, Jordy. Okay. So I first met Jack and Darlene, in the mid-'80s or so. I was playing for the Gold Kings, and the place to go after Gold King games was the Los Amigos. And Jack and Darlene were fans, and of course at that time they were involved with Faha. And I don't know why we met or how, but we seemed to just hit it off. And they just kind of took me in. They were mentors for me. They were my Alaska parents, you could say. Just truly nice people. And Darlene always bought. So how do you not love people that always bought you nachos and beer? So, it's kind of fitting that Tammy scheduled me to follow Father Byrne, because that's the two most solemn people in the room tonight, Father Byrne and myself. So, just kidding. Forgive me, Father, for I think I lied there. Before I talk about Jack and hockey and what he meant to me, and not just me, but all our coaches, I want to relay a story that some of you may know. But Darlene told me that on one of his Vietnam rescue missions, a enemy bullet came up through the bottom of his, is it cockpit, Al, or is it a cabin? Cockpit? And missed him by 1 inch, Darlene described. Jack never mentioned this, as far as I know, to me anyway. He wasn't a braggart. He was definitely a man of his generation. It wouldn't be like Jack to talk about that. But I thought that was very impressive. Anyway, so about hockey, so I was playing Gold Kings, and a lot of these other coaches were, and we were just kind of out of college and just kind of figuring out who we were as adults. And we started our careers were starting to end. So we decided to coach, and I mean there was a number of ex-Gold Kings that wanted to coach, some because they had sons and they wanted to coach their sons, but many that didn't have sons that still wanted to coach and kind of give back. And Jack was a mentor to us. And, I told Tammy, I said, I don't really have a funny story of Jack, because he was always so, not serious, but he was such a good listener. And more than anything, I think a president or a leader has to be a good listener, and Jack certainly was. We'd have coaches meetings, things would get raucous, arguing back and forth, and Jack would listen. He'd chime in once in a while, but at the end of the night, Jack would speak, and generally it was the right tone and the right thing to say, and it's how we move forward. And certainly with our board meetings got that way too, with the Arctic Lions and with NAHA before the Arctic Lions. Jack was there, and he listened. And all in all, he's just a very impressive man. So, and he had a good temperament, and just really good guy. And whenever I needed some help in my personal life or hockey life, I knew I could go to Jack, and I would get great advice and really kind of loving advice. So thanks for sharing him, Tammy and John. Truly, they spent a lot of time with people not you in this hockey world, in this town. They truly did. So that's generous. Anyway, God bless you, Jack. And I know Darlene's somewhere in the room, because there's free beer tonight. Darlene would never allow that to happen. Okay, thanks.
So, a lot of stories about Grandpa Jack tonight. Now, unfortunately, I did not know him as long, or if I'm being honest, as well as a lot of you did. So instead of telling stories, I'm going to approach this completely improv, like with my speech for Grandma Dar, and talk mostly about what my grandpa meant to me personally. So, sorry, but this speech is mostly to him because he is in this room with us. So I'm going to be giving this to you, Grandpa. Not too long ago, I was on a rather long drive with somebody and turned to family history. And I told him a bit about what my grandpa had done, all the things he'd done for the community. He turns to me and asks, "Don't you feel any sort of pressure? Like, you're a young man and you still have your life ahead of you, but that's like a lot to have to build up to with just one member of your family. Don't you feel any pressure with that?" I thought about it for a second and realized, no, I don't really feel any pressure to live up to those great expectations. And that kind of surprised me. Why don't I feel any pressure? So, thought about it a little bit more, and I think just today I finally realized why that is. As somebody said earlier, Grandpa, he didn't really brag a lot. He'd tell you stories, but he never boasted about his importance, even if he was extremely, 1,800 people. That's a rather large number. But he never bragged about it. And he always focused on just how he could help other people. It didn't matter how big or how small the thing was, helping somebody was helping somebody. And it didn't matter what the context around that was. So all that led to this December, a friend asked me to help out with her wedding, and I was happy to do it. Didn't want any pay for it, didn't expect it, because something that my grandpa had basically subconsciously been teaching me since I was born was not to, if you can help, offer help. Don't expect anything in return. And he imparted that through every story that he told me about his entire life. So I helped out with the wedding, everything got done, and my phone was blowing up the entire time, but of course a wedding, I'm not gonna check it. I check my phone, and it's my parents, and they say, call us as soon as you can. So I call them, and I believe my mom responded, and she said, your grandpa, he passed. And I sat there for a little bit, back at the church, and I kind of thought about it, and went downstairs and went to the reception. Went about the rest of my day, everything continued as normal. And then I got home, and I was sitting there, and I looked at this beaverskin Stetson that I keep in my cabin that reportedly belonged to him and then his grandfather at one point. I looked at that Stetson, and as I realized that was the only thing that I had left on this earth of my grandpa. And that was really strange. I think that was when it really hit me that I hadn't seen my grandpa for the last year. I was never able to make it down to Denver to see him. There's always something coming up. I was busy with this one thing, and I have this other thing to do, and I wasn't able to make it. And that made me think of everything that he had taught me, and all the things about myself now that I never realized I got from him. And I could give you the whole list, but I'm not going to waste any more time than what I've been spending up here rambling. But I think what I'm trying to say here is that my grandpa has made an impact on all of us in this room. We all have stories that we can tell about him, all things that we can say that he really impacted us with, and me especially. There's so much that I have to thank my grandpa for, and I never got the chance to do that. So I hope he knows that I am thankful for all that. I hope that he always knew, even though I never really got to say it, that I am really thankful that he was my grandpa. And I would like to say to my other grandpa in the room right now, thank you too. Thank you to everything you've given me as well. Love your family. Hope you all have a good evening.
name is Stephen Reed, and I knew Jack when I was a chaplain at Fairbanks Memorial Hospital. I knew Jack as, and this will sound repetitious because we're talking about a great man, a tremendous leader, a great listener, devoted husband and father. I heard so much about Darlene. I met Darlene, got to know Darlene, and then later when she passed, but just his incredible love for his family, his incredible leadership, the way he could come into a situation and just say, and listen and say, how are you doing, chaplain? What's going on? And I was like, wait, I'm the one who asked that question. And it just threw me. And just such a compassionate, caring person. So powerful. And I miss him tremendously. And things that I frankly didn't know until I went to his house to visit and saw the article from Detroit about all the missions he'd done, the various things that were around that I simply didn't know about. And I talked to him about some of the Dustoffs, and I said, what was that like? I can't even imagine. What was that like? And he said, really, it was like the 4th of July. I said, oh. And then I got this wonderful image of fireworks, and I thought, oh, yeah. And I was like, wait a minute, those are machine guns, right? Those are rockets and they're trying to kill you. He said, well, yeah, there's that. Well, it was just his approach, just his attitude. Tremendous man of faith. I know I'll see him again, and I'm thankful for him. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Andy Greenblatt, and I met Jack and Nate sheep hunting. Took them into the Brooks Range, I suppose probably mid-90s or something, and then started flying them to their moose camp. 95, there you go. And we became pretty good friends. And I don't have one real story. I wasn't thinking about telling anything when I got here, but Jack, you know, when I asked him about the Dustoff stuff, he never said anything about it. The only stories he ever told were funny stories, things that happened, like bringing a medevac in at night and he lands and all the latrines are up right next to the landing site, and he comes whipping in there and blows them over, and there's all these nurses sitting there that aren't too pleased with him, and he said they unloaded the patients. He didn't take his helmet off because he didn't want them to know who it was. And I said, I think they probably knew with your height. I mean, but Jack's stories were always positive. When he talked about other people, it was always in a positive manner. Loved his grandkids. His famous blueberry pancakes. But when it came to flying them out, Jack always told everybody what to bring. Don't bring too much because it's got to fit in the Super Cub in their moose camp. And I think the reason he did that is because he brought so much stuff each time that if they brought a little bit of stuff, there had to be room for Jack's stuff. So whenever he went, he brought enough to be very, very comfortable. I think he remembered the two-man tent with Nate and didn't want to make that mistake again. They had a very comfortable camp out there. But Jack has been a great friend for many years, and truly going to miss him. Thank you.
evening if I would tell a fishing story. Nobody just talked about fishing, and Jack was a great fisherman. But I met Jack back in the late 80s, and I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce. He was back to the net, and in the CPA world, we would run across each other, and he went from the utility business to that, because I was a director of the utility. But anyway, we just kind of bump into each other once in a while. And at any rate, I got to spend a few days in the hospital in October of 2017 with a busted leg. And Jack came in and said, would you like to pray a little bit? And I said, well, sure. He was the Stevens minister at the hospital, and he was, we got to talking and got to talking fishing, and I said, well, you like to fish? He said, I know I like to fish. I said, you want to go fishing sometime? He said, sure. And then there was another fellow that I met about that same time. His name was Al Gearing, and he was a minister, and he wasn't able to be here tonight. He was some family who were driving up to Elkham. There, I invited him fishing, two of them, and then Al invited another fellow named Doug. I don't remember his last name, but he's a youth minister. So we go north of Sitka to the cabin, and we have some really interesting conversations with all of the religions going on. And then, reluctantly, we were able to get Jack to tell us a little bit about his big catch. And he said, tell us a little bit about how long it would take. And he was getting a little worn out from fighting his fish. And he said that they were on a seiner that had been converted to a charter boat for a period of time. And he said he was tired. And one of the rules is you can't put the rod on the boat. You can't touch the boat. Nobody can help you. There's just all sorts of silly rules that they got to on this big giant fish. And he said, well, being tall was really easy. He just put his leg stood up on the gun, and he just rested a lot of it on his knee, and let his muscles rest a little bit. The captain came running out of the cab and said, Jack, while you're resting, the fish is resting. So he had to fight the fish some more. But I think the funniest one that we were, Doug and Jack and Al and I were all in a cab, and we're running around trying to get a bunch of stuff so we could get on the boat and get the heck out of Dodge, sit there. And we dropped Jack off in one place, and Al and another, and me, and Doug was riding back with the cab driver to the dock with some of the supplies. The cab driver says, what are you doing? He said, well, we're going fishing. You go, what are you going to catch? He said, well, we hope to catch some halibut. And he says, well, don't catch a world record, because the world record holder wouldn't really like that too much. And he said, well, I don't think he'd mind. He was just in the cab. and this cab drivers couldn't hardly see himself. But anyway, we didn't catch any really big fish, but we had a lot of fun in this trip.
As most of you know, Jack was at the VA Senior Center in Aurora, Colorado, and my husband and I had lived in Aurora for 34 years and then built a house in the mountains. And so we were the closest family that Jack had. So it was an honor and a gift for us to, whenever we went to Aurora, to visit him. And there's a picture of myself with Jack, and I'm holding a bag of pistachios, and Jack's holding a can of Verner's, which is a Michigan first soda pop ever that was invented in Detroit, Michigan. And so Verner's was a big thing. If you were sick, you had a cold, whatever you had, your mother always gave you Verner's. So I told Jack that I promised him I would keep him in pistachios and Verner's as long as he was in Aurora. So I just wanted to add that. And the last time Dave and I got to see Jack was like 5 days before he passed. We were there, and he was in and out of coherent. You know, now and then he would speak to us, we'd pray, and I went and made him a Verner's, and he just loved drinking that. And I said to him, I had the picture of Dar and Jack when they got married. I put that in front of him, and I said to him, "Do you know who this is?" "Well, of course I do." And I said, "Okay, just remember, honey, that she is waiting at the gate for you." And 6 days later, she came and got him. And so that was our final time with Jack, and until we meet again. So there we go. Okay? It was a pleasure. Scott?
I'm gonna keep this really short because I am improvising now. Just sitting there at the table thinking about what I could say about him, and there are many things that came to mind. And I've known him being the youngest here, probably known him the least amount of time, but I think in many regards we all have a special relationship with him. And I would say if there's one thing that really stood out to me about him, it would be, as many of you have said, him taking charge and taking the lead. I mean, he inspired me, taught me with discipline, so here, let me divert a little bit first. Every Thursday in elementary school, he would pick us up and we would go to his house and we'd spend a day together. We'd oftentimes go shooting, which we all love doing, but of course, that was all started by him. Make blueberry pancakes. As Ian said, we had popcorn, we had fun food. And something that I was thinking about was how I probably wasn't always the easiest, obviously being, 8, but even despite that, he would still show love. And that taught me that if I were to put myself in his shoes, it would be doing the right thing, even if it doesn't always mean doing the easiest. And yeah, that's all I have to say.
Deepest apologies, single last thing, I'll keep it short. Now there seems to have been a bit of debate about whether Jack was a more serious or more humorous person. I'm not here to give you that answer, I'm just as confused as the rest of you. And this is the reasoning for that. First moose hunt, maybe second, maybe third, I get them all mixed up. I don't have the greatest of memories. We had, actually Al here, had just gone to moose and shot it right in a mud hole. Thank you very much for that one. First time dressing a moose, actually Jack managed to clip the bladder with his hunting knife, so it just turned into an even more fun evening. The sun was setting, we knew there were bears around. It was really just wonderful time. We finally get back to camp, get the meat hung up on the racks and all, and me and my grandpa are standing around the fire. I believe Dad and I were in the cook tent. And I was young, I didn't know much about bears, and I was curious. So I asked him, by the way, Grandpa, are bears, do they like daytime more? Do they like nighttime? Like, are they nocturnal? And he just turns to me, looks me dead in the eyes, and says, they love the night. And then turns on heel without saying another word and marches into the cook tent. And I'm left there looking at the path to the outhouse debating, I don't think I need to go to the bathroom anymore. A few months after that, he also taught me how to siphon gas out of a car, and when I asked him how he learned to do that, he very quickly changed the subject, and I still have no idea what that was about, but that was an interesting one. So thank you all for endearing me.
Concludes the celebration of life for Dad. Stick around, party up, go for seconds and thirds on the food, please. Thank you all for coming. You can see that the legacy is strong. I'm so proud of the nephews for speaking and sharing their stories, and you can just hear and feel that Jack has passed on, and they're in good hands. So thank you so much for coming.